Okay, so this is going to be a different video than I normally make. I am planning on making a full-on game. I have a concept already that I'll show you in a second. I just have this screen up showing that I'm going to be using Unity to make this game, and I'm using the high universal pipeline or whatever is I'm using the template for Unity that makes things look pretty, basically. And then from that, there is all this stuff that you get, and then this is the main scene from that thing. You probably recognize this, and they had a player controller camera thing that I just took from there. But other than that, I'm going to be basically making everything else. And so if I play this, you can see that it's basically the camera controller that I'm talking about. It allows you to move around, and you can see it on the left side. I almost pointed at the screen with my hand. with my mouse, you can see that that's the character model thing, and that's what's controlling my look around and all that. Now I'm going to be making a chess game. It's going to be like a chess battle royale. Let me switch back to this scene. Okay, so right now I just have a plane on the ground, or in the game, and this plane has just a weird, like, I think it's a concrete texture. Yeah, concrete holes texture, just so that when I move around in the game, I can see that the motion's happening, like this. And what I'm going to be doing is replacing this texture with a generated texture for the game of chess. And so to explain the game itself, I'm gonna go to another screen here. Okay, so this is a little bit confusing at first, but basically I have, like, the game's gonna be on a chessboard that's, you know, an arbitrary size, and it's gonna be quite big, and there's gonna be not one or two players, but it's gonna be maybe, you know, 16, 32, you know, some sort of large number of players, and most of them are gonna be AI unless I somehow figure out how to make this a multiplayer game. But really it's going to be a game where it's just you versus a bunch of AI. So what you're seeing on screen is just 3 different teams, and the squares are each pieces. So if I actually take off the territory part, I'll explain that in a sec, but the squares are each pieces, and the ones with the gold are the kings, and then the one with the black are the queens. And you'll have, in the beginning, you'll have a king and a queen. That's all you start with, and that's how all the AI start with. Or I might change it where you might have, like, different levels where the other opponents start with their own, like, setup, their own territory and all that kind of stuff. So the way this works is that, and I'm still kind of figuring out as I go along, but basically what I had thought of was, the king, whenever the king moves around the board, they claim a little square. So it's gonna be their territory, and I kind of mark that with these regions, these kind of alpha channeled regions. And when a king has a region, it gains them like 0.1 of a point or something like that. And I'll figure out that number later. It might be a thing you could change in the settings, or it might be a part of what makes each level difficult, if there are going to be levels, or it might be just procedurally generated. And so let's say this region, the king has 4 pieces on the region. So obviously the region that they're standing on, so the red team has 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's say each second you get 0.1 points. And now from chess, if you don't know, pieces have like a point ranking system. So a knight is worth 3 points, a rook is worth 4 points, a bishop's also worth 3 points, and then a queen's worth 9 points, I believe, and then the king is worth like 25 points, but if you got the king, you know, you're over, so it doesn't really matter. And then the pawns are worth 1 point. So with that, you probably have a menu somewhere, and you can select the pieces and put them down based on how many points you have. You're basically buying pieces and putting them down. And then I'll figure out, like, maybe you can only put the pieces within the territory, or within a certain region around the king or something like that. So that's basically the gist of, like, the main part of the game. But there's also a side part that I'm debating on, which is sort of what happens when pieces clash. So let's say this might be a little tricky to do this, but let's say I have, let's say these were not queens anymore. Let's say they were like knights. So this one makes a move. Oh, and I should say how the pieces move. So each there's going to be rounds or like steps, and all the opponents and you make a move. Like, so if this was a queen, I could move it here, and then it's gonna take effect in the next step. So everyone makes a move, so they don't know what the opponent's moves are, so all the moves happen at the same time. So it's like, this is how the board looks at one stage, and then the next step you did this, and then it takes effect, and all of a sudden their queens moved in some sort of way like this, and then this one moved here. I actually can't do that, but it would move here. And so that's how it's going to work. I don't know if I'm going to have just one piece move at a time. You could choose one piece or maybe two or something, but those are like choices that can be made later. This is just kind of I need to make the system, the back end for this. Okay, but specifically for the pieces clashing, so let's say these were knights, and let's say this one would be here, and this one would be here. And let's say your team red, and then there's the opponent green, and I move my knight here, and I don't know what the green team is doing, and the green team doesn't know what I'm doing, but they move their knight here. So in this case, we both landed on the same one, and when that happens, what did I have? I had something like this, where if it was here already, and I took here, and then they also took on the other square, so it'd be basically like we swapped squares, then they would become zombie pieces, and I'll explain what that is in a second. But actually, I didn't even think about what happens if we both landed on the same spot. In that case, well, I'll decide that later, I guess. I guess it could just be like they both die and no one gets any reward. But okay, so let's back up though. And why can't I back up? Okay, the undo is a little weird. So let's say this red piece was a queen, and so red team was moving another piece in the next step, so they weren't worrying about this piece, but they didn't realize that in the next step green can come in and take the piece. Well, when that happens, you capture the piece. It's gone from the spot. This piece gets put in its place, obviously, and you get the points from that team. So red team is obviously down a queen, and you have now in your like currency bank 9 more points, so that you can make another queen or a couple more pieces. And so yeah, that's how it's gonna work. But I need to set up basically I gotta set up the board. I gotta set up basically all the code that would store, well, the whole game. And so I'm gonna do that now in this video. I'm gonna at least set up the board and possibly not possibly, I need to set up the render texture for the plane so that we can actually see the changes that I'm making. So basically to see the progress. And that screen is definitely not the same screen as what I thought it was. This is the screen I need to use. Okay, so the first step is to make a script on the chessboard. I'll name this Chessboard Manager, I guess. Chessboard Manager. And that script would land in the assets section, but I want it to be in the resources section, and I guess I can make a new folder called scripts. I'll store all my scripts in the script folder. Okay, and then I'm going to open that, and I'm going to have to make a new window to show this, because you won't be able to see this anytime soon, or actually you'll see it instantly. Okay, and just like that, we switched over. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is figure out I'm not figuring out, I gotta make another class that will store it's a bit weird because I'm using a different monitor than I'm normally using. I want to make a class that's going to store the board itself, so I'm going to just name it Chessboard, and I will make, actually that's not how that works. I'm going to make a constructor class thing, so Chessboard, and to define the board, I'm going to input it with and then int height. And in fact, it might be better to just have a single dimension resolution because the board's going to be like a square. But I guess I could have it, you know, like a rectangle. But it might be better storing on memory if it was a square. Okay, so the next thing I gotta do is I gotta create a public something. Okay, so what I basically just did was I created an int array or matrix. I called it board, and then I initialized it here with the width and height. And then I just created the actual instance of it, well, down here, but I created the slot for it here. And I'm just gonna set it as an 8x8, just like a standard chessboard for now, just to make things easier. It's gonna be a square, so I can fit it on here easily. And in fact, now that I think about it, if I'm gonna have it be like a render texture to a square, and it's not a square on here, then I'd have to rechange, or I have to resize the plane that I'm gonna be using to render the game. And also, I might as well, I won't be able to do that, never mind. Okay, so the next step, oh, I forgot that you can't see the Unity window that I was just talking about. It doesn't matter, I was just talking about the square that's there, and you can remember what that was. So, okay, so the next step is, by the way, I set it as an int array or an int matrix. I don't know if there's a better way to do this. It probably is, but I'm just going to store the piece type in another list, and I can do it up here. Public, or I'd make like a dictionary or something. I'll do that in a sec. But I'm going to store like the types, and then the types are going to equal like an integer. So like the pawn is going to be of type 1, empty square would be type 0, and then, you know, bishop type 2, and so on. And that will just read from the board when I'm rendering it, and then look up the type that makes sense. And in fact, I could even just store it in the list in its specific order. So I could just do this. So if I did public okay, right, so I got a public string array. I'm just calling it pieces, and I have it filled here with initialized piece types, and I'm just adding empty, pawn, knight, bishop, rook, queen, and king for now. I'm also gonna plan on adding those zombie variants, and I'll explain the zombies. Actually, I have an idea for the zombies. It's gonna be quite interesting, because you can only like move a piece once every turn, or maybe a couple pieces once every turn. If you have a zombie, the zombies you can't order, right? They're gonna move around the board, but you can't tell them where to go. They're just gonna fight for your team. Well, if you get them on your side, and I'll explain how you do that. But if you get them on your side and they're fighting for your team, they move wherever they want, but you're gonna have more pieces moving each turn, so you're gonna have more action. You have more firepower, basically. But now that I think about this, it might be better if I put the pieces inside the chessboard itself, so that each board can have its own like piece set. If it just so it's more like dynamic. Like let's say I decide to want to make another game where it's just a regular game, I could just initialize the board with a different set of pieces, and it will have a different board for that. You know, I don't know, it's probably better to do it this way. So let me move this into here, but I need to give it the types. So I'm gonna take this off, and then it's gonna be, I'll give it, or in fact, I probably don't even need to do it that way. I could just do chessboard dot pieces. Go pieces equals a new string thing, and it's gonna be just this right here. And then something is wrong. I just cleared out the other thing, and I can just take away this. So I'll just do this. So right, so if you don't initialize it with your own types, then Ooh, and then I'm gonna have to figure out. Okay, there's some trickiness I'm gonna have to figure out later on when it comes to the board, like how the pieces are gonna interact if there is no pawn, and if there is a pawn but it's in this another slot. Like, do I treat the number 1 slot as 0 and number 1 slot as pawns, or do I always look up for every time a piece moves? I look up that if it is a pawn by name. That might be complicated what I just said, but I'll have to figure that out later. And let me move this back because my OCD. So I probably don't have, but I feel like I do. Okay, so there's that, and that looks good. Okay, so inside the chessboard class, I created a variable, or not a variable, a function, or a method, I guess, that is called getPieceByIndex. And I'm going to make the other version getPieceByName. So this is going to return the name of the piece based on like the index it's in, and then the other one's going to return obviously the index it's in, so the number that represents the name. So if I put empty, it'll be 0 and pawn be 1. Now there is a problem that I have to address here, which is if the index is smaller than 0, somehow you put in a negative number, then I'm going to return null. I could return empty, but I might change that later. But so yeah, I could return empty, but I'm going to return null for now. And then if it's greater than the piece length or equal to the piece length, then I also return null. And then if those conditions were not satisfied, then I can just return the piece itself. And I'm going to actually real quick do that with the other type. So getPieceByName. This is going to be a string, and this is going to be name, and then this will be int. And then all I got to do is say if name. Well, I don't have to do checks actually for this one. That was loud. It probably came up on camera. I got Adobe Cloud just made a notification. If you didn't hear that, then don't gotta worry about it. Okay, so actually the first thing I gotta do is I have to, I think pieces or arrays like this can have they have a search function, I think, maybe. Actually, probably not. I kind of feel like they do, but I could just do it manually. So let's do for int equals 0, int 2. Can never spell pieces right. Pieces dot length I plus. Wait a minute, what the heck just happened? Hold on, I forgot to put the I in the beginning. I equals that. Okay, and then so we're searching over the whole thing. We say if pieces item I equals name, then we will return I. And then if we don't do that, so if I close this out, yeah. So if we don't find anything, we'll just return null. That seems good. Actually, I don't think we can return null for int. So we'll say -1, so that we know it's not in the list. Okay. So this whole concept is going to be kind of hard to do with my limited knowledge of Unity and C#, because I think there is ways. The problem here is that I wish I could just store like a class type, like the class type of a pawn and a knight and a bishop. I could just store this, and then I can store them in a big array of those, and then just call their render functions when I need to render, or their calculation functions when I need to calculate their movements. But I know that would involve, like, you couldn't have a array, like I couldn't do this if I did public chessboard array, right? Like, so some sort of matrix like that, right? And then, so imagine this wasn't chessboard, but this was like pawn, right? And that existed. Well, if I wanted to store a knight in here, I couldn't do that. If I did something like piece, like, or chess piece, and all the pawn, the knight, the bishop, and all those inherited from or extended from the chess piece type, it would still cause a problem, because when I put that instance of a knight or a pawn or a bishop inside this array, it would just revert it back down into a chess piece and it wouldn't store any of its information. Or I could have the chess piece class be a number and a name, just like I'm doing here, but then the problem still exists. It doesn't have its render function based on its name or its type. Well, now actually, here's what I will do. I can do this whole thing. I basically just I'm kind of being contradictory because I'm going to do exactly what I just said I can't do, but in a different way. I'm going to create a new class down here, public class. I'm going to do exactly what I said I wasn't going to do, and I'll do chess piece. And then, so I'm basically just going to do this same thing, but with chess pieces. But I wish I could have them specifically, because if I have the render function for a chess piece, in the render function itself, it's going to have to check what type of piece it is. So I'm going to have to hard code its render inside the chess piece instead of having a class that would render the knight specifically or the bishop specifically. So then we're going to have a public chess piece, and it will be created. So I need a int, or in fact, no, I don't put the int part here. I just say its name. So string name, and then and that's gotta be public. And then I could set it for now. I could just set it to empty when it's initialized. But then here I'll have a string name, and then I'll do this dot name equals name. I think that's how you do that if you have the same thing twice. Okay, and that's basically all I gotta do. And then I'll also have public. In fact, wait, I don't put the render thing here because I'll need to pass all these values to a single render function instead of a class. But this could work fine. So chess pieces is now going to be the pieces are now going to be chess pieces. So I need to do this here, and then to do this I need to create new chess piece, and then it'll be empty. I don't need to actually put anything there, do I? Or maybe I do, I don't know. Yeah, it's fine. So I'll just fill this whole thing out again. Okay, so I just fixed all the code that would, so now it supports the chess piece class. I think that's it for that section. Okay, so the next thing to do now is to work on the renderer. For now, I'm just going to render the textures like with like a color to represent like the pawn or the empty and stuff like that. And in fact, I could probably store that in here when I create this. But yeah, for now, I'll just kind of have it not hard coded. I'll do it like dynamically in a sec. Okay, so the way I'm gonna do this render part is I'm actually gonna use a compute shader, and I don't need to, but if I want to make a game where, like, well, first of all, I've been really into doing calculations on the GPU. I've just been getting into it recently, so I kind of know how to do it now, sorta. But if I want to make a game that could just be like really big, like imagine a board that's like insanely huge, maybe that could be like one of its features is the fact that this game is just so big, then I need to be able to calculate it efficiently, and with a GPU that would work out all right. But there's still some issues, like if I'm going to calculate the movements of pieces with the GPU, then it might be a little weird because I think it'll still work, but I can't like have the GPU calculate where it's going to move and then make the move. I'll just like have the GPU figure out where it's going to move, and then I'll have a CPU run over it and see if there's any problems with those movements, like if two pieces land on top of each other, or if a piece tries to make a move in a place that isn't allowed to move there, like if you try to move through your own piece, through another of your own piece. So with the GPU though, in this part in the render, I need to create a compute shader, and so I'm going to flip over to this screen, and then right here I'll make another list or another folder for shaders. And then I'll just make a copy shader right here. And I'll name this render chessboard shader. Now shader language is a little bit weird. So let me open this up and let me switch back. So the way we do this is I need to pass in the board. So I need to create I need to look at my last code because I don't remember what I used. I think I used maybe a regular just buffer, or did I use structured buffer? Let me look at the code for a second. Okay, so I added a read-write structured buffer of type int to the board, or named board, and this is gonna be the thing that stores all the numbers for the piece type, which I'll have to convert at first because it will be, yeah, I'll have to convert it because I don't want to send, like if we look over here, obviously the board, the pieces, or actually the board doesn't even have, oh no it does, yeah, so right here, oh wait a minute, let's see, can I just store the chess pieces in here? That was the whole point, wasn't it? So yeah, I can do that, and then just do that, and yeah, I think that's fine. So yeah, I'm gonna have to convert the board into its pieces, into its numbers, and then send it to the compute shader. And after I have that, this is where I'm going to figure out all the rendering part. So I'm going to render each piece according to some input, and I guess what I could do, because I would like to render an image, like, you know, the image of like a queen and a king, and you know, something to make sense. But that would mean that I'd have to pass in those textures, which is a lot of hard coding, and I don't like when things are hard coded. I like when I could just kind of create a new type and then pass that in. So maybe I could pass in the chess. Can I do this? Chess. It wouldn't be of type that. It would have. So I'd have to create some sort of. Oh, I know how I do this. I gotta create my own like structure in here. So I gotta do struct, and then I'll do chess piece. That's not how you spell it. Chess piece. And then I do this, and the code seems good, and I just have to add the certain thing. So int will be so this will be what do I call it? Number. Number is a type of thing though. So let's do index, I guess. Or I guess it's not, just pink for the way shaders color there, or like where VS Code colors this. So I thought this would be meaning something else. Okay, so I guess I could do that, and then I'll store the texture itself for each type of piece here. Which is gonna be a complicated mess to figure out. So I'm actually gonna try to figure all of this out, and then I'll come back when I got it all. Hopefully, unless there's a problem in the process. Okay, so I had a problem with the compute shader and the GPU and all that kind of stuff. A major problem, and I attempted to record me saying exactly what the problem was, and then I'm gonna come back in a day, and I'm probably gonna give up on trying to do it on GPU, but maybe I can figure out a way to do it. But I apparently was recording like in a wrong way. The audio was crap. I started recording, like the recording itself didn't even start until like 5-6 seconds in, so the first couple words I said weren't even in the recording. So I'm just redoing it now. There's two main problems with what I'm doing. So here's the code for rendering out a render texture that I would put onto the plane over here. And when I have to create a compute buffer so I can send all the data from all the pieces to the GPU. But I need to declare a size for that. And the size, like I didn't think that would be that big of a deal. I figured out the size and dimensions of like the data, like the bytes. And The problem with that though is that with the 16 by 16 image, if you look right here at this error, it says invalid stride 4,100, and then the biggest it can be is 2048. So I have a stride that's huge. Now apparently, like I could like split this up into multiple buffers, I think, but that's like really confusing, especially for my brain to handle right now, because I've been working on this for like 2 hours, and I'm just not knowledgeable enough about this kind of stuff. The other problem, if I go back, the other problem with the compute shader is that I need to define. I'm sending the pixels over in an array, but I need to define the array size. So I have to say right here how big the array is. So I can't have textures that are bigger than or any different from 16 by 16. And I was trying to figure out how to do that. Like I thought I could send in the width and height with it, and then all I do is right here I'd say width times the height. I know I didn't put the height there, but here, let me just do that then. I thought I could do this, but if I go back over here to the Unity thing, here it shows an error now saying that it's compiled failed. Like it's not, it's like a syntax error basically. This is not how you write this. I can't just use the width and the height from here into the pixels, and so I don't really know how I can dynamically do this, because this is the problem with this is that this is a struct, right? So it's not like I could send in over here a float, or rather I'd send an int width. Actually, maybe I can't. Hold on, let me just test something. Send in a width and a height. Let me take this out. Let me put this below. I don't think this is gonna work, but I do this, and then I do this and this, maybe. So now I'm getting the data from like actual variables and not just inside the struct, but I doubt this is gonna work. Okay, yeah, let me bring this over here. There's another error. Let's see what this says. It says shader error, array dimensions must be literal scalar expressions. I have no idea what that means, but I'm guessing it's still a problem. Like this wouldn't work this way. So yeah. I will leave this video off here actually, and I'll come back tomorrow. But I think this is like good. I got the concept down in this video. I wish I could show something visually about it. In fact, what I'll do is I'll make yeah, I guess here I'll do this. The last thing I'll do is I'll make a CPU version. So instead of rendering a render texture out on a GPU, I'll make a CPU version real quick and dirty, and it will involve, and so I'll leave some of the code here because I was about to delete this thing, but maybe I'll still use it if I can figure it out on the GPU. But yeah, so just so you can see what I was talking about, and I mean I guess I kind of already visualized it right here with what is it? Where's the right here? And this is all small now because I was making this is what the king looks like, by the way, for just like real quick. But this is what I was doing for the pieces. But this over here, you kind of saw it already. So this is what it would look like, but it would just have the colors would be obviously these, like the king, the blue king and stuff would look like this, and then it'd just be a tint of blue, and so yeah. So I guess I can make a CPU version real quick and show you what it looks like. Okay, so that took much longer than I had expected, but I got it done. So here is the CPU side. So let me find it's right here. So yeah, so this is the old GPU render algorithm that's not really working right now. Before I get to the render, I did add two things. I added this. So I put the render texture after it gets rendered. It's going to the what's it called, the plane, and then I'm just doing that every frame, so it's constantly being updated. And then if I press the space bar, I add a night at F. That would be, oh no, that is F3, but 5.2 basically on the board, and you'll see that in a second. The other thing is I have this function called Fitboard. Now when I have any size board, the plane like resizes itself to fit the dimensions of the board. And then right here is the render, so it's pretty simple. It's just I got the width and the height, and then of the board obviously, and then I create a texture. I create that texture with size 16 times the width and the height, so that each so you know it could fit each image. Then I'm basically just getting the pixels, looping over all the pixels, and then looping over all the pixels for each of the the pieces, and so I do that right here. Where is it? Actually, this first part actually, basically everything in this for loop right here is making the checkered pattern that you'll see in a second. And I just basically have a mod. By the way, if you look at this part of the code, I'm pretty sure I can shorten this to take just one if statement. But I saw online that there's a guy who suggested for a checkered pattern you do x plus y mod 2, and then that's all you need to do. And then the if part would be to color it black, and then the else part would be colored white. But when I do that, it only does that for the first row, so it doesn't really work. So I just did the long way. Then down here, I'm checking if it's empty. So I don't need to copy all the pixels for the empty, obviously, because it's just empty. So I'm just skipping that step. Just saves a little bit more time. And then I just copy the pixels down. Now, if I'm doing this a little bit weirdly, but if the image that I'm using as the piece has alpha in it, so like some of the pixels have alpha, then if it's anything with alpha, so if it's not 100% opaque, then I just take the alpha, multiply it by the RGB, or you know, take the RGB and multiply that by the alpha, and then I add that. So it's an additive thing. It's just adding. So it's not really like if there was a pixel that was slightly transparent and I put it onto this board, then it would a little bit stand out from the other pixels that are perfectly opaque, because I'm adding it rather than doing like a mix or whatever, like how Photoshop would do it. But anyway, it doesn't really matter though, because they're going to be opaque or completely transparent pixels. Nothing in between. Or I could do that though, but anyway. And then I just set it here, and then down here I set the texture, I set the pixels, apply the texture, and then return the texture. That's basically it. So if I switch over to this scene, well, you can already see it, and actually it's quite dark. I thought I had a light going on. I do, it's just still that dark. Okay, so this is how the texture, or this is how the plane looks at first. Then everything gets done and starts rendering the texture and everything, and then there we go. So we got the king at the corner and the pawn here. I didn't have an image of the pawn. And then if I press space, I place down the knight there. I can place it anywhere. And that's basically the back end for now of the system. If I go in and I change this to a 16:8, so now it's going to be 16 width and 8 height. And I do this again, which I might have clicked it twice. Okay, yeah. So it's still doing it, but I need to zoom out. Let's see if I get the camera. Oh, and I created another camera, by the way. The original one was the player camera, which I could switch to. I think if I just do this and then I do this, yeah, I can switch down to this, like walking on the game board, and I press space to jump, but it puts the knight down. But I like the aerial view a bit better for the time being. So if I just go in the camera and then I change the height to a bit higher, you can see the whole board. So imagine an arena, I could do something like this, where it's I could do like, I don't know how slow this would be, but if I did, let's see, 128 by 16 or 32, let's say. I don't want to go too big. I was gonna do 128 by 128, but it might be too slow. And plus I'm recording, so I don't know if it will do any weird nonsense, like messing up the recording. So here we go. I press play, and then it's quite big. If I go up in elevation, oh, it does feel a little bit like it's lagging. Maybe, or that might just be the motion blur. Oh, and I can't see anymore. I need to. Actually, I want to stop this for a second. I'll make this like basically infinite. just bring this up to like 300. Oh, it was even more than that. So 1,000, 1,200. There we go. That actually fits everything. And so there's the pieces down there. It's incredibly small. In fact, I could full screen this, and I could scale this actually, so we can see that everything's working how it should, and it seems to be running quite fast. So yeah, just imagine on a board like this, or you know, a 128 by 128 board, and have all these different types of what are they called? What did I call them? Kingdoms. Well, actually, I didn't say they're kingdoms, but like imagine they're like kingdoms, obviously, because it's the king and the queen and all that, and they all have different colors, and then each of the background, you know, black and white checkered spots will be colored the color of the kingdom. And now, actually, there is one thing I added to this as well, which is really simple. But if I go back to the other OBS thing, if I go down to the chess piece, I just added this right here, just the integer for the team. And I could do like, I could also add like color, I guess. I could have the team color. But I just have integer for now because I could just use the number to get a color. So 0 will be red, and then 1 will be like orange. And in fact, I could use the number to be like a hash value, or not hash. It's like a, basically I take like, so it'll be 0 will be red probably, but 1 will not be orange. It'll be some other random color, but it'll always be that color with the algorithm, and it'll just make it so that each run you'll have like a randomly generated set of colors for your team, and you just spawn in as one of those colors. But in like multiplayer settings, if I somehow figured out how to make this a multiplayer game, then maybe I'd change this so that you could pick your color for your team. But that's a lot trickier. For now, I just want to get this thing working. So at least now we can see that, and I'm going to put this down to 64 by 64. It's taking a second to load up. Okay, so let's do this. Let me switch this over, and then it's running, and I need to redo it because I think it just needs to be redoed. Okay, here we go. And so wow, 64 is a lot bigger. Okay, so I'm right here on the screen. I got a little bit of a demo going on in the background, just kind of showing off how the game might look in the future. Obviously they wouldn't be moving this fast, and also the knights don't move like that. If you see that they're just moving randomly by one spot, or maybe up one to the right one, you know, in a corner. But the kings do move like that, and I just have them randomly moving right now. But oh, and then I also realized there's probably a memory leak that's going on with this system, because this has crashed twice already, and I see right now my memory going up. It's at 80, 81, 82, 83. So let me stop this. Yeah, now it's at 63, 51, 49. Okay, yeah. So somewhere in my code, I am like just creating, and nothing's getting deleted. And I need to figure that out. That's a huge issue. But and I believe that's probably in the board itself, something like that. Maybe I'm creating, oh, in fact, it might be the render texture. I might be creating a bunch of these render textures, and it just doesn't get rid of the last one or something. I don't know, but that is something I got to figure out. But at least now I have nice little, I can do it again. Let me make sure that my memory doesn't crash though. Yeah, so just imagine like all these different colors and a lot going on, much more going on, and zombie types, and slower, but it's a more like a battle royale puzzle strategy type game. And I think that'd be pretty fun to play, and so that's why I want to make it. Anyway, so I hope you also watch the next upcoming videos of this this game dev thing that I got going on now, and hopefully I can complete it. First time actually completing a whole game. But yeah, hope you look forward to seeing that. So yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed watching this. And please like, subscribe, and comment. Very much appreciated.